We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Robin. Welcome to a new Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Wednesday night, September 4th, 2024, as we bring you a new episode. If you're wondering why I am in a cheery mood, it's because the White Sox just wrapped up their series at Baltimore, and shockingly, they won a game, snapping their 12-game losing streak. And they've also begun making changes within the front office. We alluded to this possibility in our previous podcast, but longtime international director of scouting, Marco Paddy, has been dismissed. In this episode, we'll recap the White Sox international efforts under Paddy, his success stories, and ponder what Chris Getz is looking for in a new international director and what that new international direction should be. We'll also talk about what went down in Baltimore, as there was some very bad. Miguel, Vargas, and Andrew Benintendi colliding, not good. Nick Nastrini fell back to his old habits, not good. But again, there was some good news. They won thanks to Nicky Lopez and Dominic Fletcher hitting home runs in the same game. Plus, we'll preview the upcoming weekend series at Boston, and at the end, we'll play a game to see how well you and us know baseball slang. Joining me are Sox Machines beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. And hello, gents. We have organization news as the Chicago White Sox have decided to move on from Marco Paddy, who led the White Sox international efforts. James, this type of move you've been hinting at for a bit. Why do the White Sox make this move now?
It's around the timing that you've seen a bunch of other teams kind of change international staffs. It's a little bit, I would say September is kind of the period to make those, like, technically, you'd see a lot of these contracts run out at the end of October, or like at the end of the league year. But, when you're clearly kind of determined to make a change, this is around the rate of time where it's like seen as professional courtesy to let the person know now, so they can start making moves or looking for next opportunities, knowing their contract's not going to be picked up. It tends to be a rougher deal for coaches who sometimes don't find out till the end of October, but we've seen movement across the league. I mean, one prominent example being Azacampo being let go with the Marlins after, being very distinguished in terms of international operations when he was with the Astros and finding a lot of their pitching staff that currently is powering them through. I think we mostly don't really know like the coaching landscape or the GM landscape that well to understand there's a mix between like who we actually hear about name wise and who's maybe really truly viewed as good as insiders. I'm assuming that that gap is even wider when it comes to international scouting, of which there's very little coverage to really understand how operations work, other than kind of looking at who they signed and how it worked out and where they spent their money. So to me, Asakapo would sound like a great hire. I know who he is. I know what successes he's had. At the same time, like, I don't really know the landscape. And I think a lot of people pointed out that Marco won 2022 Scout of the Year, which I explained like in the VC, like it's kind of more of a lifetime achievement award at this point. Reflects like his standing in the game and not necessarily. We broke down the numbers in 2022, like he was at the top, that he had the best DRS for international scouting. Like it's not like that, but this was a person who had a lot of successes in kind of high dollar figures, high dollar, more older Cuban players, or, throwing the farm at Luis Robert. As much as I saw like that kind of gets discredited, like I think the White Sox of all organizations should not be a fan base that discredits the value of nailing the right guy to throw everything at and getting him. So that's not something they've really succeeded at in other areas, but it's a limited market and they weren't competitive enough in the Dominican space. And that's something that Chris Getz had talked about, diversifying. And moreover, it's a market that you're seeing Cuban players leave early and earlier, where you don't have like those 23-year-olds who are, high minors or near major league ready to kind of throw these guarantees at and feel like you get a level of certainty where you're with your rate of return, but it makes it worth it. You're seeing those guys, leave like as teenagers a lot more often. Than the White Sox need to have the depth of their pull to really make the impact. They can't really just target it after getting like a sure thing outfielder all the time anymore. So it's a bit of the game has shifted in a way that no longer benefits that strategy, and they haven't really shown a counter move in a way that makes me more tempted, especially with the way the Wilder scandal really set the White Sox international operation back, to view this as more as like not maybe quite the length of a Don Cooper run, but sort of that like we can see this defined period of time where his strategy was effective, and then we saw the landscape change and not really an adjustment with it. Where I think as much as like this seems like needed and something that was being hinted at, and I think the general reaction was like it's about time. I think it's generally this was someone who his tenure should be looked at, his contribution to the team should probably look back positively when we're 10, 15 years out and assessing this guy's career when he's retiring or whatnot. Like a net positive in all, I would say.
Following up, is it too early to tell if this will impact the White Sox efforts come the January signing period?
I would think it probably won't, just because so many of those deals are kind of already done or already agreed to. If we see like a prominent defection, that would be one thing. But I would assume like you're not really changing what we're going to see in January. You're starting to hope that it's going to be a long-term build that's in line with the value maybe see of making a better and better located Dominican academy, hoping you make you more of a presence in that area, because you're not really seeing them compete at the top of the market. It very much reminds me of kind of the way they operate in free agency, where you're getting elite relievers, because that's the kind of the market where you can kind of spend and dedicate the level of scouting resources where you can compete on that, because there's a more limited market, as opposed to being viewed across the league as just not really having the robustness in terms of staff or focus or process to really consistently deliver Dominicans and the volume that I think other teams have excelled at.
So Jim, on SoxMachine.com, you recap Paddy's career. Which prospects were his best finds for the organization?
Well, I think, if you set aside Luis Robert and Jose Abreu as being like special circumstances, cannot be signed the way they were signed. The rules were changed. Not with Abreu. Abreu was too old or old enough to where he could sign whatever deal he could find. But like Luis Robert Jr. would have been subject to the rules that like limited Shohei Ohtani's ability to command any kind of bonus that he was truly worth. The White Sox spend that money. I credit like Paddy for being able to sell either Kenny Williams or Jerry Reinsdorf or just whoever needed to sell to allocate the resources, because like they had to outbid the Cardinals and the Astros and the Red Sox and other teams that usually play that market pretty well. So if you set them aside for being just more a matter of like the White Sox randomly showing like sheer might and willingness to spend, then, it gets pretty slim pickings. Like you have Fernando Tatis Jr., obviously, but he did not play a game in the White Sox organization, which makes it hard to know like whether he would have been as ascendant if he were with the White Sox. Like, I'm sure, like, he's talented enough to where it seems like he would have been something. Just would he have been a player who commands a $300 million plus extension, a few years into his career? Like, not necessarily convinced he would be that, but he'd probably be a major leaguer of some regard if he stuck with the White Sox. But if you get past him, it gets pretty slim. Like, Lenyn Sosa has the most experience of anybody he signed that was a traditional 7 or 6 figure signing. And then you get to Bryan Ramos, who might be the best when all is said and done, but just hasn't really gotten his opportunity to stick. Jose Rodriguez looked like something for a bit, but then he hit a wall and then had the gambling scandal. So he's not somebody you really want to put a feather in your cap for. And then, there are a couple other guys who are like, mildly intriguing, but probably Ramos, I think, at this point. Especially since that was during the Luis Robert penalty box period, that I think you give him a little bit of extra credit for finding somebody who you could work with around some limitations. But the thing I'm curious about with Paddy, like when it comes to trying to figure out what to expect from his replacement, is the White Sox are very strange when it came to international money, when it either comes to dealing it freely for like other teams' extra relievers, or like they would like set aside $1.5 million or $2 million, not spend it, and hope that like somebody became available that was worth it, signing late in the class. And I'm curious whether or how much that was Paddy's strategy of like, here are my networks, here's what I feel confident in, versus like Jerry Reinsdorf's overarching philosophy of like wanting to spend money where it can be seen. Like, he never showed any interest in spending money on amateurs, and other teams like the Pirates, who didn't spend, would run up the score for amateurs because like they saw an advantage and they saw that was being like a cheaper way to take a lot of shots at talent versus like trying to hope that a free agent panned out. Same thing with the international markets, especially after the Wilder scandal. They just sat it out. And given that they weren't all that interested in signing 16-year-old Dominicans or Venezuelans, until very recently, and that they're kind of 0 for 2 in that regard. I just wonder if it's a case where Reinsdorf is like, I don't really care about this. So sign Yolbert Sanchez, who might be an infielder in 2 years. Sign Oscar Colas, who might be in the majors in 2 years. Yoelqui Cespedes might be a 4th outfielder. Like, those might be the players that he could sell, because like if Reinsdorf doesn't like investing a whole lot of money in players who might not work out, like that might be the easiest, trying to shorten the path between signing in the big leagues. Didn't work out, obviously, but that's what it kind of struck me as. If it wasn't Paddy's idea, maybe it was like the best way Paddy could think of to go along with some kind of philosophies that Reinsdorf has in place in other areas.
The other thing to consider with the new international director, and depending on how conversations go in the next CBA, to probably the light of Jerry Reinsdorf and other MLB owners, there could be an international draft where the rules and the way things work change again. So the whole international market is still kind of waiting to see if that decision happens, but it is business as normal for Major League Baseball on the international front. We'll see on who the White Sox hire. I would assume finding a manager is a bigger priority, but at least in the totem pole for Chris Getz, he's got 2 tasks now. He's got to find a new manager and find a new international director of scouting.
A couple MVP awards for Javier Mogollon, and maybe we're looking at this 10-year difference. It's just something to keep in the back of your mind.
Jose Rodriguez, who doesn't get caught gambling. One thing that I'm thinking of when it comes to the international draft is just like, it would be very funny just one, I would say that the international director might be more important than the manager at this point in the White Sox. I can't even call it a win curve right now because it's flatlined for months. They really don't have any, trajectory right now to speak of. So they really have to get into talent accumulation, I think, as best they can, as many angles as they can. So I might say that the international director might be more important than the manager, and they both feel like as random in terms of like which ones will actually be successful. So there's that. And then I keep waiting for the international draft just because it does fit, like when it comes to capping international spending and putting slot values in and then firming up the slot values, and just in terms of always meeting the White Sox where they don't the history or the arc of baseball history is long, but it bends towards Jerry Reinsdorf's laziness. And so when it comes to like him not spending on the draft and him not, wanting to care, like Rob Manfred or Bud Selig, they're always willing to meet him like where he is. So maybe that's still his advantage in terms of being a power broker in baseball, is just like twisting. It's like, I don't really want to spend on these guys. Please do something about it. And they eventually get there. But the international draft has been one of the sticking points. And I think it's, they've used it as a wedge issue with the players union, because international players are not as big a fan of it, whereas domestic players don't really, it's not a priority for them. And they've used it as a wedge issue in the past, but I think there are going to be a whole lot of wedge issues on both sides going into the next round of CBA negotiations. So I'll be curious, like, what the priority of that is.
Yeah, that wedge issue from the players' perspective, the players from the Dominican Republic have been promoting the idea that this is awful. Do not have an international draft. But you'll have some ex-players from Venezuela and other Latin countries who are like, yes, please have an international draft, because the only ones that benefit from the current system are the Dominicans. So it'll be an interesting conversation moving forward. But yeah, the White Sox will have a new direction on the international front. The unfortunate thing is we're not going to know if whatever their new direction is working for 5 years to see if they're actually producing anyone that could be major league quality. We may get some guys that generate some hype immediately in the next couple of years, but to see that pay off in the major leagues, it'd still be at least 5 years. We'll see what the White Sox do this upcoming January.
What's up, everybody? It's Heisman Trophy winner Matt Leinart. I've got a podcast called Throwbacks with actor Jerry Ferrara, where we'll be talking all things sports, but also so much more. We'll give you the behind-the-scenes stories from my days as the quarterback on an iconic college football team to Jerry's days as a star on an iconic TV series. So subscribe to Throwbacks wherever you download your podcasts, and follow us on all social media at Throwback Show.
Now back on the field for the Chicago White Sox. They lost 2 out of 3, so they lost another series, but they did win on Wednesday. So the White Sox are 32 and 109. They are back, baby. With 21 games left to go, they can win 53 games this season if they just win. If they go on a 22-game winning streak, which, you know what, we're owed that. We're all owed that for what we have endured in this season.
What would that pay?
A lot.
If you bet and then like roll it over every game the rest of the
waterfall. You would get a lovely phone call from the sports book explaining why they cannot cash out your pay.
And probably like the FBI or something like that, looking for kind of game fixing.
As I just rewatched Killers of the Flower Moon today, so I was specifically thinking of the FBI character saying, I'm here to talk about all that fraud on that White Sox.
Steak dinner bet update for those curious. There's 85 runs left that I need in the next 20 games. So if the White Sox allow 4.25 runs per game for the rest of the season, I am going to win that steak dinner. Now, for this series, as I mentioned in the intro, there's been some bad and there's been some good. And one of the things that's just kind of crazy, and Kevin Brown, who is the Baltimore Orioles television play-by-play broadcaster, really summed up the collision between Miguel Vargas and Andrew Benintendi on Tuesday night very well. Here's that clip.
Yeah, and the truth is, if you have great stuff, you can challenge over the white part of the plate a little bit more and let your stuff just play. If you don't, you better figure out.
Oh, no! Oh, my goodness, the White Sox have just gone full White Sox.
Now, James, in Tuesday's game, that was not the only collision that Andrew Benintendi had. He had a near miss with Luis Robert Jr. earlier in that game, but man, Vargas really took a big blow, and Brooks Baldwin had to play, but Baldwin's wrist is still not healthy. And a day later, Baldwin's going on the injured list, and here comes Bryan Ramos. Any guesses, James, on how Grady Sizemore is going to work out the infield now? Because it sounds like Ramos is on the taxi squad. So is he even an option for Sizemore to start at this upcoming weekend?
He was activated pregame because Baldwin went on the IL for a sprained wrist about a half hour before the game. So it will be very complicated because now Vargas and Ramos are both on the roster, and they haven't really committed to how to get either one at bats without playing them at third base. And they clearly have gone all in. And I get it from like a clubhouse leadership perspective and like, general productivity. They've been pretty committed to Vaughn and Sheets. I guess I shouldn't say productivity. I get why Sizemore would look at the roster and say, like, these are my steadiest guys. I don't think from an organizational standpoint, like, we should commit at bats over these two that we're not necessarily shouldn't be sold on for next year, at least in the same role, for two guys that we really do kind of need to find out about. So if Ramos or Vargas is able to eke away DH at bats, especially against left-handers, or send, we see one of them at first base, so there hasn't been anything mentioned about that. That would intrigue me. They need to figure this out at some point. Yohan Moncada would be even more fun wrinkle to throw into it. That I don't know what they do because they haven't been willing to entertain him at third base. I think Grady shot it down when he started his rehab stint a week or so back. So real mystery. And, who knows even how quickly we see Vargas back in action. Since the last time we saw him, his face was like literally swelling in real time. Benintendi had 2 collisions, but I would argue that he was probably the innocent party in both. Since one involved kind of a repeated harasser and Luis Robert wandering over to another side of the field, and the other was very, very blatantly outfielder's ball calling it, and Vargas didn't hear it and kept going into his elbow. So, yeah. Organization was really in a great place up until 5:30 Central Time, where clearly everything changed and the troubles are over.
Jim, let's say Vargas tells Grady Sizemore, hey, I can play. I can see. My vision is not impaired. I passed concussion test. I can play. Between Vargas and Ramos for the rest of the season at third base, how would you divvy up that playing time? Like, who would you rather see start at third base to try to get more clarity on how to move forward with this roster?
I'm Team Ramos, just generally speaking. Like, I think if it's a toss-up between anybody and Bryan Ramos, I tend to side with him just because, I've followed his development curve. I think that he offers defense and some offensive upside, whereas Vargas his glove's better at third base than anywhere else, but I would say Ramos is a clear step above him from what I've seen of Vargas so far. That if you're looking for kind of all around supports, then I would go with Ramos. But Vargas comes in as the guy who is the center piece of the entire White Sox trade deadline activity, so it feels like you have to honor that a little bit. It's tricky, and I wonder if they counted on Ramos playing as well as he has like the last month, that maybe they figured, given that he's just kind of looking okay or mediocre over the course of most of the AAA season, that maybe they acquired Vargas thinking, well, Ramos isn't going to be in any September plans, so let's just have him play the rest of the season. Vargas will get all of 2024. We'll revisit the conversation 2025, and then Ramos has like an incredible August and like 14-game hitting streak going on, and the equation has changed a little bit. But I would prefer Ramos. If I were Sizemore, I'd like to put like Vargas at second and Ramos at third and switch him every inning and just hope, see if we can get like a random draw of like, Ramos gets easy opportunities at second, or you plan on whether it's a lefty on the mound or a righty, but you rotate them every inning or every batter if they're on the same side of the infield. If you want to sneak one over at shortstop, that'd be fine. That would be my out of the box suggestion if you want to play both of them. But yeah, it's. I guess it's a good thing that Ramos has forced the issue, but I also think it's like not a good thing that like Vargas is playing, he hit the ground with a thud, and it's been a project to get him back up to looking like a threat at the plate, and I'd much rather see Ramos when the at-bats don't mean anything, because I think he can make better use of it than Vargas can.
Hey, Sox Machine podcast listeners, would you like an extra $500? Go to BlueWirePods.com/survey and complete the Blue Wire audience survey about you and your podcast listening habits for a chance to win a $500 gift card. This survey will help create a better advertising experience for audiences and in turn help this show. That's BlueWirePods.com/survey, where all you have to do is answer some simple questions for a chance to win $500. Make sure to read the full terms and disclaimer, plus complete the survey for a chance to win. Again, the website is bluewirepods.com/survey. Then there's Nick Nastrini. Nastrini Tuesday night, I was excited to see and how he would perform after his excellent start against the Texas Rangers in his first start back, or at least first start returning to the White Sox from Charlotte. And it was the old Nastrini that we saw earlier this season, just 1 2/3 innings, 4 hits allowed, 7 runs total, 4 of them earned, 6 walks, and 2 strikeouts on 72 pitches. Out of that 72 pitches, 42 were balls. A lot of the at-bats were just not competitive for Nastrini against Baltimore. And again, Baltimore is a very good offense. Jonathan Cannon, though, looked a lot better against Baltimore's offense, especially left-handed batters, than Nastrini did, as Nastrini allowed 3 doubles in the first inning, and you just knew that he wasn't going to be long for the game. This is Nastrini's 4th start in 2024 where he has allowed 5 or more walks. So we were back to the drawing board here, James. I know Nastrini's working through some things, and Bannister and Katz are trying to help him. But we have game film of Texas where you watch that start against the Rangers, and you can tell yourself, you know what? Give Nastrini a shot to be a starting pitcher. And then you put in the tape against Baltimore, and it's like, you know what? Let's make him a high-leverage reliever. How do you think the White Sox play it moving forward? Nastrini is not a projected starter this upcoming weekend in Boston, but he could make another start against Cleveland. Do you think that they'll just continue to ride out the Nastrini experience for the rest of the season?
Rest of the season, I don't think they're ready to pledge that much. As far as next turn, there's just not a ton of options that are really compellingly more major league ready. Eater's still walking a lot of people. Sean Burke's still kind of getting worked up all the way to full speed, and is probably someone you're looking for more innings after the season, like AFL. Kai Bush, you really like to see his best fastball back, and honestly really had very similar problems in Nastrini without maybe the same proof of concept outing versus Texas. Call me crazy, call me that my pain threshold is incredibly high after 5 months of the season, and my nerve endings don't work anymore. But I thought Nastrini looked okay for the first 20 pitches. He had a couple things go wrong, he didn't get out of that Henderson bat the way that it looked like he would have, given that he executed some good breaking balls in the full counts, and then he had a Wendelstedt at bat go against him, and then after that his command lost 5 of those 6 walks were in the second inning by the time he lost it. It's not good that he is very capable of his control just melting down of a few things don't go his way, but I'm imagining something less rocky sees him stabilize into a 4 or 5 inning not pretty start, but something that's not wow, maybe we need to abandon ship with this guy type of outing. So I'd at least like to see how it goes in the next start to see if this is permanent or some sort of long-term multi-start malady opening itself again, or it's something where he can get back to what he was doing really for the last month after another blow-up outing. So I don't really think they have much better choices. So that's obviously forcing my hand. They're not going to call up Noah Schultz. They're not going to extend Javier Uriarte. Drew Thorpe has another date scheduled next week that I think he has to make instead of making a start. So I don't see this better serving the long-term option or even a short-term option that's really a lot more compelling, unless you want to see Jared Schuster try to get the 5 innings somehow, or something that's not really necessarily what you'd feel comfortable cycling every 5 days to the end of September anyway.
Schuster did look good relieving Nastrini against Baltimore. That was a pleasant surprise. James mentioned Iriarte. Jim Iriarte made his Major League Baseball debut in that Tuesday loss. He pitched 1 inning, allowed 1 hit, walked a couple batters. He allowed an earned run, but he did get his first Major League strikeout on 28 pitches. What did you think of Iriarte on the Major League level? Because I know you got a chance to watch him when he was in Birmingham.
Well, it was funny. I was talking to Birmingham pitching coach John Eli over the weekend when I was in Chattanooga and asked about Iriarte. Last time I talked to him, it was when Drew Thorpe was called up like minutes after it was official. And so I had to preface it by saying, this time you can actually talk about it on the record because it's, you don't have to worry about breaking it. But he said that, it took, Iriarte, he was somebody who could eventually find equilibrium in the start, and he'd have some ugly outings where it looked like he was going to be knocked out in the first inning, or maybe not last 3, and all of a sudden he gets through 6, and that's how he led the minor league in innings, or at least the White Sox minor leagues in innings. Even though you'd see the walk totals and go oh, that's pretty inefficient. They would all be piled up into bad innings. He might be off his game. Might have given up a couple of homers like in the Rickwood game that he started. And then he finds it. He just, whether he finds it with a mound visit or with between innings, just, rediscovers release points, staying back, gets his power back, and he's able to even it out. So that's the good news. But I do wonder, when it comes to him as a reliever, throwing him in this role against major league hitters, whether that's going to be the tendency of just having kind of rough innings, because he does need 30 or so pitches to maybe find exactly what he's doing and get into the rhythm. And the first inning is more about survival and eventually finding that track, versus somebody on the other hand, Peyton Pallette, who looks like he comes out firing his best velocity early on, his best stuff, and then loses steam by the time he gets the second time through. That's why I'm most curious about watching Iriarte. And when you have 120 plus innings, and that's by far a career high for him, I also wonder if that's going to be instructive at all. That he's already past his point of knowing what he can do and what his stuff looks like, and so now it's just a matter of having him pitch, but maybe you're not going to get the most effective version of him regardless. So it's good that he's in the majors, already in the 40-man. There's no harm in doing it, but I could see it being not all that impressive for the rest of the season just because of these tendencies he's shown.
Offensively, in the White Sox win, Andrew Vaughn hit a home run. He almost had 2 home runs. His second deep fly was caught right at the base of the center field wall. So Andrew Vaughn now has the home run lead. We played that game a few podcasts ago, and who will end the season as the White Sox home run leader. Paul DeJong still leads with 19 homers before he was traded to Kansas City. But Andrew Vaughn now has 16. Andrew Benintendi has 15. Luis Robert has 14. And very depressing, there's no White Sox hitter who has a slugging percentage above 400. But let's forget about that, because Nicky Lopez and Dominic Fletcher both hit home runs, James. And that's when I knew there's no way that the White Sox could blow that game because of just how rare it is that both of them are off the schneid at the same time. When watching Dominic Fletcher, offensively, James, I just don't know yet. He's still struggling despite the home run. He's been in a bit of a slump. He's 2 for his last 17. The overall season numbers are not very pretty, but boy, he can play defense really well, and he made a great play throwing out Cedric Mullins as he tagged up at second base, at third base, and as the more and more advanced metrics come defensively, Dominic Fletcher's grading out very well in right field. Does Fletcher got staying power? Should we already just assume that he's going to be playing in right field in 2025, or because of his bat, that position is still up in the air?
I think you can put him in the mix. I don't think you can say this is a need that's so well served that they're not going to be looking at other possibilities in right field over the offseason, or that no one can really push him out. So he's was sold that his power comes kind of pull side when he finds a breaking ball to kind of sweep across with his swing. He's not really someone who's going to pull out of heaters. And this was kind of in line with that. So you wonder if it's a little bit of him finding his timing and fitting the description that he had coming in, but this was already someone that the bat was in question coming over, and they were kind of supposed to figure it out over the course of this year. And even mostly the ambition was glove first, strong side of a platoon, and not necessarily like an everyday guy. So jury's still out. He knows that he's trying to kind of really prove that he can drive the ball more over the final month. He's said it pretty blatantly. That's the part of the game that he's not satisfied with. But certainly at this point, it's just both looking at the current major league roster and the high minors depth. There's the road is still pretty clear for him to claim a stake if he can. It's just I don't think he's necessarily, he's still slugging 280. So
right,
we're at where we're at. There is actually one White Sox player with a slugging percentage over 400. That's Yoan Moncada, obviously an essential piece going forward. Paul DeJong is also only at 18 home runs.
Oh, I'm sorry, gave him an
Dominic
extra
Fletcher,
home run. I apologize.
Dominic Fletcher is a mere 17 down the stretch, which has been done in baseball history from assuming the home run lead away from a player who has been on the team since.
Well, I mean, Nicky Lopez can also make a run here. We can't discount Nicky Lopez. Lopez had quite the game on Wednesday.
I don't know. We ran a story this day that Lopez homered saying, "I'm not a guy who's going to hit home runs on record." So I don't have a ton of faith that this is going to be like a big part of his approach. But yeah, great to see. Battled Gunnar Henderson to a draw in the battle of leadoff man.
Yeah, for Lopez, maybe we're putting the cart before the horse, Jim, but I don't imagine Lopez is coming back next year for the White Sox. Like, would you be interested in the idea if Chris Getz said, we looked around, but the only veteran middle infielder we could bring back was Nicky Lopez for the price that we could afford?
Would he be interested? Like, when it comes to, I think with the Braves, he speaks of it as though it was the happiest time of his life, because like he'd been with some miserable Royals teams and then he's with the miserable White Sox team. So the Braves were like a team where one, they were very successful, and two, like they played to his strengths. Like he was in a position where he could help them win because he was asked to play defense. He was asked to bat ninth and turn the lineup over. Playing against righties, was really not, nearly an everyday player like he was the White Sox. And with the White Sox, as somebody who, he didn't sign with them, but like I could see him signing with the White Sox this past offseason were he non-tendered by the Braves like they're going to, that I could see him saying like, yeah, this is a good opportunity for me to get bats and be traded to a contender. And then he wasn't traded, and he wasn't he wasn't claimed at the end of August when they put him on waivers. So he had to spend the rest of the season there. So I wonder if he's better suited, like just finding a team that will use him as like a guaranteed contract bench player versus somebody who needs a second baseman playing most of the time. Because if he's a utility player on a White Sox team, while that plays to his strengths, it doesn't do him any favors. Like I think he's better off being like a first division utility guy versus a second division starter for what his skills are and maybe how he can sell himself to other teams as his career goes forward. Like it might be a case of like coming around February, if he hasn't found a taker, then maybe the White Sox are appealing if they haven't found anybody yet. But if I were him, like I might look towards finding a role like the Braves had for him that he filled pretty well.
I did not know this until I just looked it up. Nicky Lopez is entering his fourth year of arbitration for 2025. So the White Sox
Super 2
could, that's going to be one of your guys' decision for those that are listening in your Sox Machine offseason plan project. Are you tendering or non-tendering Nicky Lopez in November? So something to contemplate. I can't even imagine, because this season he got $4.3 million for ARB 3. I don't know what his number would be for ARB 4. $5 million? $6 million? I think that's too much for Nicky Lopez.
Probably 5, I would think.
Okay, thank you, James.
Yeah, but it would probably be 5, I would think, something like that. And we've seen them make that decision with Yolmer Sanchez, who was
very similar profile.
Yeah, better player.
Yeah, so enjoy the last 20-some games of Nicky Lopez. But hey, he did hit a home run in a White Sox uniform. That totally happened, and it helped spark the victory for the White Sox to snap their 12-game losing streak.
I don't think it's crazy to think about him coming back. It won't be through the arbitration process. Like that profile player does not get third year of arbitration, let alone fourth year.
This series preview segment is sponsored by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices in the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. The Chicago White Sox are out on the road this week visiting Baltimore and Boston. If you are following the team to knock off some MLB ballparks you visited, check out Game Time for the last-minute deals. You could also use Game Time for other sporting events like the Chicago Bears. Opening kickoff against the Tennessee Titans is this upcoming Sunday, September 8th, and tickets are already scarce to see Caleb Williams' NFL debut. Also use Game Time for shows and concerts. Game Time has tickets for Will Ferrell's show, which is really popular. It's going to be on October 26th. Billie Eilish is coming to the United Center November 14th, and Riot Fest tickets are now available. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now the White Sox move from Baltimore. They have the off day on Thursday. They are heading to Boston to face a Red Sox team that is sliding in the wrong direction. The Red Sox are back to 500. They're 70-70. They're 10.5 games back of first place in the American League East. They're 4.5 games back of the wild card. They have lost 5 straight games. They're 3-7 in their last 10. They are not a good home team. And I saw this first person when I visited Boston this summer with my friends for the San Diego Padres series. The Red Sox, for XYZ reason, they just don't play well at Fenway. They're 31-38 at home this year, which is pretty eye-opening. The pitching problems for this series, the Red Sox don't have their life in order. So it's all to be announced from a Red Sox perspective. But for the White Sox, Friday night, 6:10 p.m. Central Time, the Dart, Davis Martin will take the ball. Saturday night, 6:15 p.m. Central Time, this is a national televised game on Fox. Garrett Crochet will get the start. And then on Sunday, which I know kicks off week 1 of the NFL season, Chris Flexen will take the ball for the White Sox. The first pitch is at 12:35, so you can watch a few innings before Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears get their season started. And when it comes to Chris Flexen, Jim, this is where I want to start the conversation this weekend because I think this is something to pay attention to. The White Sox, when Flexen appears in a game, poor Chris, they're 2-27 this season. And it is a 21-game losing streak right now when Chris Flexen has started for the White Sox. Does it get snapped this weekend? Does this versatile losing streak finally end for Chris Flexen?
I'm inclined to say no, but well, I was looking up Michael Soroka that they're 1-21 in his game. So Chris Flexen looks like a rich man to some people on the White Sox pitching staff, but I was inclined to say no, he won't get a win or the White Sox won't win. The losing streak will continue. But if you think of it in terms of what would make Red Sox fans or Boston media's head explode, because I think they're very astute and gifted at maximizing frustration and controversy, I think Chris Flexen picking up a win against the Red Sox and Fenway would be what sets the tabloids ablaze. So let's say yes.
Jim wins chaos. I love it. Yeah, because the New England Patriots are not going to be very good this year. So there's not a whole lot to distract Boston fans until the Celtics and the Bruins, I guess, get started. Boston College did beat Florida State in college football, so maybe. The Saturday being a national TV game, very interesting choice for Fox, especially during college football, but we'll get to see Garrett Crochet. And with Davis Martin and Crochet starting the first couple of games, James, and again, Boston sliding in the wrong direction and really struggling at home this season. One would think from an outside perspective, oh, this is a get-right series for the Red Sox. Their chances of making the postseason are very slim at this moment. But I got a strange feeling about this weekend series. Like, why am I strangely confident, James, that I'm like half expecting the White Sox to shock the baseball world and win their second road series of the season? Because this is like a similar feeling I had when the White Sox were going to St. Louis, that I wasn't quite sure, because I wasn't quite sure about the Cardinals. What should I make of the Red Sox? Not just only now, but I don't know what their near future looks like moving forward, especially with how strong the Yankees and the Orioles are.
It's probably relying on the near ready position prospects that they have that are more highly rated than what the White Sox have going on. It's probably, leaning on like Roman Anthony and Marcelo Meyer and Kyle Teal, and generally feeling better and smiling more than the people around here get to. I think that's what I see for the future. Probably spending like, I don't know, $100 million on a free agent, just kind of casually because they feel like it. Something like that. That's kind of what I see their future doing. I agree your feeling is strange. I can't rationalize it. I don't understand it.
You just wrote that the White Sox are back on SoxMachine.com. Are they back, James, or not?
22 straight losses in games you pitched in is an unlikely event. A 22nd after we've been 21 in for Chris Flexen is a very likely event.
Gambler's fallacy.
All history trends suggest us it should continue. One game, which way we would go, I know which way I would pick. And I think the White Sox 5-45 from the second half, winless in any road series since the start of May, since like one of the Drake Kendrick Lamar diss songs came out that night when they won that series.
Right.
It's a very long time ago. No,
that is right.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, Jim James is not confident. How about you?
I think it's like the fumes from a Nicky Lopez homer.
It is. I'm high on the fumes right now. I'm high. I think they gotta. No, probably not. They'll probably get swept and start a new losing streak.
Well, I mean, the Cardinals have been the same kind of team of just like every time it looks like they're about to get it going, they trip over themselves. Unclear, like whether, how long Mazzoliak's going to be there, like whether they change managers. Like they have a whole bunch of, they've had a whole bunch of things of getting in their way. And so the White Sox were one of the things I think they'll look at the end of the season, like, oh, that was a sign that our season was never going to take off. Similar to like the White Sox a couple of years ago, never being able to escape 500, along the same lines for Boston. So maybe this is, in hindsight, you could say it being a case where like I said with the Chris Flexen thing, just I can see it in hindsight or after the weekend being like just another thing that drives Boston fans nuts. And so I think that's kind of maybe what's driving the idea that the Red Sox could blow it. But yeah, just the White Sox have been that team that makes everybody else feel better. And so why not the Red Sox?
They did, now that I've smacked my head a few times and like have induced some trauma that, damages my ability to think analytically. They did almost take 3 out of 4 from them at home early this season. I do think on an existential level, it's a real waste that Flexen's 2 wins came against like the most process-oriented fan base in the league, where the Rays are just like, results are always variable. It's bad, but these things happen. As opposed to like fan bases like Boston have a real sense of the theater, the stage of this is a disgrace that cannot stand, and outside of shaking the fist things, it would mean a lot to win this series in terms of producing a like air raid sirens level of panic among the metro population. But I don't think there's any intrinsic reason to feel it's more likely. It would mean more in such hallowed ground to disgrace it with such an aberrant result.
One thing I am curious about, like Alex Cora signed that 3-year contract when the Red Sox were 54-47, and now the Red Sox are 70-70. Not saying that there's going to be any buyer's remorse, because if they do not sign Alex Cora to a new contract, Alex Cora would be a hot commodity for other teams with managerial openings. But this weekend, I'm just going to keep a close eye on the Red Sox, because, again, I'm not sure. Last place is definitely within reach now. The Blue Jays are just 3.5 games back of the Red Sox. The Rays are just a half game back of Boston. I don't know what to make of their new future. I also have questions about Toronto. There seems to be a lot of smoke brewing up about the disappointment in the Blue Jays front office, not able to take advantage of all the talent that they accumulated, and it's not translating to a lot of postseason success. It just seems like right now the American League East, where we thought maybe could be this juggernaut of a division in Major League Baseball, is truly just a 2-team race between the Yankees and Orioles, and both teams are fantastic and very strong. But the Red Sox, Rays, and Blue Jays have a lot of questions, and who knows? The White Sox surprised me tonight, beating the Orioles. Let's see if they can continue that success into Boston.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Our last segment in this episode, a little bit different. We're going to have fun with words, baseball slang. So an article from Tyler Kepner of The Athletic and the New York Times, it's titled Baseball Slang 101, A Guide to Talking Like You're in a Major League Baseball Clubhouse. And I found it very interesting. There were a few slang phrases that I hadn't heard before. And we have the luxury of having a beat reporter on the show. So I figured I'll ask James if he has heard these types of phrases within the White Sox clubhouse. And if we don't recognize them, Jim, we try to take a guess, or I'll have you try to take a guess, because I have what the supposed meanings are for these slang phrases of what they mean. So let's get started. I'm going to go easy to the ones I've never heard of before. And even I was a bit surprised at what they meant. So a very popular one that we have used on this podcast. James, have you ever heard the phrase eyewash within the White Sox clubhouse?
Yes, plenty of times. Where was this article published?
The New York Times. Jim, of course, we use this again all the time. It's fake hustle.
There is a car that's often parked outside of Camelback Ranch that has eyewash as a license plate.
Do you know who owns that car?
I do not, but it's very spiffy.
Tony La Russa.
Slang phrase, guy. What is I'm sure you have heard this described other players, James, as someone being a guy.
I have, like, generally, like, a dude is a good prospect and a guy is like just a guy, but like I have also heard it used positively, like he's a guy, like this is someone who will like be in the mix. This is someone who has a role, like someone to be watched. He's not a star, but like he's a guy, like but it often uses derisively as like he's just a guy, like this is kind of roster filler. So it's a bit more flexible, whereas like a dude means like, yeah, obviously it's still a little subjective, but it's always like a positive connotation, whereas a guy, it's a little flexible usage based on tone.
Yeah, I think it's like context dependent, especially among draft picks, like calling Davis Martin a guy middle of the third day, like that's a compliment to him.
Right.
Or Romy Gonzalez, like in that status, whereas like Nick Madrigal calling him a guy,
not good.
A guy who used a top 5 pick. Yeah, not good.
So one that I have not heard before, and I'll ask you, Jim, if you can guess what this is. What does the slang phrase kitchen mean in a baseball clubhouse?
Is that along the same lines as honey hole? Or actually, no, that's kitchen, I think, is like working inside, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The inside corner of a hitter is the kitchen.
Yeah, and it's a matter of like, it's not necessarily like, it's more of a pitcher-oriented term, not necessarily like, how hitters respond to it.
Does anyone complain about pitches getting thrown into the kitchen in the White Sox clubhouse, James?
I don't think hitters would be like, oh heavens, my kitchen, like that. I think pitchers are more likely to say it. But like the idea of like, yeah, I was working in his kitchen. I hear it more positively than like someone who's, wounded by a threat being like, you got in my kitchen, man. It's not okay. Like, I haven't heard it like that.
Jose Abreu for like his entire second season. I'm not sure what the word kitchen is in Spanish, but
La cocina.
So James, explain this one. Let it eat. When do you hear let it eat in the White Sox clubhouse?
Well, talking to pitchers, it's them basically throwing at max effort or, feeling comfortable to throw it at max effort. Like if, especially like you hear it a lot with people talking about rehab or bullpen sessions, like, the last session I was like maybe at 90%, but today I got to let it eat a little bit. Like you're able to throw it like max intensity. It's never going to be quite game intensity when in that environment, but let it eat is to indicate you're not having to hold anything back.
So this was one I was not familiar with, Jim. Show and go. What is your guess and what does it mean, show and go?
Isn't that just not having to participate pregame, or like having a little more lax schedule before the suiting up?
James, is Jim right?
Yeah, pretty much. It's like a game where there's not pregame batting practice, and also there's not having pregame batting practice does not equate to show and go, but a show and go is both allowing for late arrival in terms of like when players are required to be there, and as a result of that, they're not going to have pregame batting practice. So it's something you often see. Like the Angels are notorious for their getaway days still being night games, and teams coming back from the West Coast late overnight, and maybe they're coming back for a homestand. That night game afterwards, because they just got in early in the morning, might be a show and go as a result. I recall, I want to say 2021 White Sox, because they were good, came back from the West Coast, did a show and go, did a show and go again because they won again, and did 3 straight show and goes as a result of just, they were on a good run and they were managed by Tony La Russa, who can be a little superstitious at times.
Is that a team-wide thing, or is that like is it always a team-wide application, or can it be for individuals?
I think you hear it team-wide team-wide application, and then individuals always are given discretion to abide by it or still show up early if they want. The people you really like, definitely you'll get players allowed to show up later, certainly veterans, maybe a reliever who worked like that the previous night. But I don't hear it referred to as a show and go for individuals.
Yeah, I've heard that on for teams, like usually on minor league Sundays is where I've come across it. Day game after a 6-game series, about to hit the road, bus ride. Like, yeah, that tends to be when the few times I've heard it, and it took me a while to actually piece it together. That was it.
The next phrase I did not recognize, Jem. Waffled. What does waffled mean in a baseball clubhouse?
This one I don't know. Like, it's a case where, is it hitter or pitcher? So I'll admit that I haven't heard it, at least, where I have confidence of knowing which side is which. So pitcher or hitter.
Well, James, have you heard this phrase, James, in the White Sox clubhouse?
Waffled?
Getting waffled.
I think that, I might have heard it, but I don't remember what it means.
So it's from a pitcher's perspective, Jim. If a pitcher says, I got waffled.
That sounds bad.
Yeah, it's a victim of an emphatic hit as a pitcher. The example is like, yeah, that guy who roped a double off the wall, I got waffled.
Okay.
I have not heard that phrase before. One. And the last one, fitting for me, steak dinner, Jim. What does steak dinner mean in a baseball clubhouse?
That means RBI based, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think listening to Dallas Braden, if you listen to him to any amount of time, just endless steak riffs about hitters driving in a run. to the point of just, complete obnoxiousness. Like, not a fan of Dallas Braden in his style, but a lot of it's just because like he just keeps going on and on and on about steaks.
Is that true in the White Sox clubhouse? Are there a lot of steak guys? A lot of steak dinners?
There's a lot of people who love steaks. I don't hear a lot of references to steak dinners. I know that's a thing. It's not what I view as a common phrase. It feels like more antiquated.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a playoff of ribeye.
Right.
Which, if you say ribeye fast enough, it get ribby, RBI. James, are there any slangs that you often hear, other than, curse words and cuss words, within the White Sox clubhouse that didn't make our baseball slang list?
You'd have to trigger my memory. Like, what's some other item?
Was slapdick one of them?
I don't feel like I've heard that specifically in the White Sox a lot. I definitely heard it around baseball. I feel like I hear it more around like writers and scouts more than players.
Got it. So a lot of dudes.
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll have the article linked up in the podcast. You can see other phrases as well, but a few of them that I did not know. And if you guys want to challenge yourself in the Sox Machine comment section, other baseball slangs that you have used over your time, Little League, high school, travel league, for the U of U, college, post them in the comments section. It'd be kind of fun to share some baseball slang, because again, there are a few that I did not know what they were. Show and go and waffled especially. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. You can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. Our next episode we'll be recording on Sunday night to be ready for you guys on Mondays. We recap what happens for the White Sox and the Boston Red Sox series. We'll be also previewing the upcoming home series against the Cleveland Guardians, which the White Sox have a chance, depending on how the weekend goes, to play a little spoiler, but the Guardians now have a little bit of ground that they have created for themselves within the American League Central Division race. You can also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. If you enjoy our work at SoxMachine.com and would like to gain full access to all of our coverage, sign up at Patreon.com/SoxMachine. We're our Patreon supporters. We monthly plans start at $5, or you can save with an annual subscription. They get ad-free versions of both the podcast and website. We also have additional tiers of support that can unlock other features, such as being part of our group chat, that you have direct access to both Jim and James. If you're interested, again, go to patreon.com/SoxMachine and sign up today. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.